Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom with our host, Bob Olson, who will now introduce today's show and speaker.
Welcome to the open door. I have left an open door before you which no one can close. Open to the love of God. Open to joining His stream of love for others. And our panel today includes Dr. Rhonda Chervin, Professor of Philosophy and a writer of many Catholic books. Then we have Dr. James Hannock from Los Angeles, philosopher, philosophy professor, father of 5 children, pro-life activist, editor at New Oxford Review. And Commander Hughes is back with us today from Corpus Christi, Texas, colonel in the Air Force, a married father who converted to the church from being an agnostic and also has degrees in engineering and in pastoral studies. So let's go to our moderator today, Dr. James Hannock. Jim, good to have you back.
Yes, thank you, and hello to all. I thought that this Friday we could explore, from a Catholic perspective, a recent statement on goals for education. Individuals, of course, local communities, of course, the whole country even. This is a statement that a fledgling, and perhaps not a fully baked, but at least a half-baked new political party has proposed. Now, what I've done here is shrunk the actual proposal, but only by about 5%. Still, it comes from a platform, and platforms can go on a bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the 3-sentence preamble to the education statement. And then I'm going to read the last, not the first. In this case, the last will be first. The last of the bullet points. And after we've reflected on that, then I'll go back and read the first of the bullet points. And then we'll see what happens. Education, the preamble begins. A well-educated citizenry. It's interesting, it doesn't say a well-programmed consumer. It says a well-educated citizenry is integral to the flourishing of our republic. Flourishing, now, that's a word with a philosophical lineage. A well-educated citizenry is integral to the flourishing of our republic. We call for a system of public and private education for all students. We promote a culture of lifelong learning. And now fast forward to the last bullet point or specific. We therefore support a public educational system that provides the rigorous formation of literate, well-rounded, virtuous citizens, as well as providing a foundation in core subjects such as reading, writing, mathematics, and science. We call for classes in civics, the arts, technical fields, vocational training, and this last is especially for my children, financial literacy. End of last bullet point. So, what think ye, panel? What think ye?
Okay, I would like to weigh in because I have to leave a little early. I'm traveling And so I'd like to get my best thoughts out as early as possible on this. And what strikes me is everything in this statement sounds wonderful if we're thinking that the words have the meaning they have in Catholic magisterial thought. But if we think, for instance, if you take the word virtue, in our culture in general, it's considered extremely virtuous to help poor women not to have their babies by enabling them to have abortion without coat hangers. So virtue is very different. So if you have a school where they actually refer the students for abortions, they consider themselves virtuous, and they would consider themselves as fulfilling this clause. So I'm asking Jim, in the larger document, see, the idea is that you could do this whole thing on the basis of natural law with definitions that everyone agrees with, but everyone doesn't agree with the definition of the key terms in this platform.
Exactly. Now, I'm not trying to dodge your question at all, but I want to give you a particular that just came across the board or the screen this morning. I have a daughter-in-law who's a very educated, professional, compassionate person who works with the immigration department reviewing the applications most often of people hoping to get asylum in the United States because of religious persecution. Now, what counts as religious persecution? Well, guess what doesn't count in terms of recent agency policy? If you claim you're persecuted, but you can actually return to your home country and practice your religion in private, if you can return to your home country and practice your religion in private, then you're not being persecuted. So there's an example of current policy supposedly helping people who are experiencing religious persecution, but that policy doesn't really involve itself in the nature of a religion that's evangelizing. We can't, as Catholics, practice our religion merely in private. How can you go forth and preach the good news to all nations in private? So that's a good example, I think, of what Rhonda's talking about. Now, to get back to her specific point, in the whole of the platform of this fledgling party, there is a very clear statement of what's involved in the right to life. And it's from conception to natural death. And this conception point connects with one pro-life group, or perhaps more than one, that are very active in working for personhood begins at conception amendment. Hope they have a lot of energy because it's going to be a lot of work. But virtue in the context of this whole platform would exclude the kind of case that Rhonda presents.
Oh, very good. That's an excellent point. Of course, you know, you don't have a similar. Do you have a similar clause, say, about premarital sex or contraception? Probably not. No,
but the contraception thing is under debate. The premarital sex is not spelled out that directly, but I think anybody who would read the document would have the strong sense that we would oppose that. Now, though, to connect with your point again, this just in, as they say, in the last week or so, it might even be the last 3 days, the governor of Oregon has signed into a law, government of Oregon, think Oregon, assisted suicide. The governor of Oregon has just signed into law the pledge that the state of Oregon will pay for all abortions. All. So they will all be free for everyone in the state of Oregon.
Okay.
This doubtless will be presented, as you suggest, Rhonda, as a progressive effort to promote the citizenry and their freedom. So
I'm glad I moved to Texas.
Well, there'll be other challenges for you. The devil is a far-ranging enemy. But that's an example, I think, of, well, let's talk about what a virtuous citizen is. We need to...
Oh, sure. Okay, so it's an illustration of my point in a way, but you refuted that point by saying anyone who votes American Solidarity Party, you probably, at this stage where it's not a popular party, will read the platform, and if they read the platform, at least if they're anti-life, after all, I mean, it's better to be pro-life from conception, even if you're pro-premarital sex. It's better at least not to abort the baby, right? But the thing is how it impacts education, but I'll stop soon to let Al talk.
All right.
If you have sex in the educational public school system, they have sex education classes where they train them how to have the pleasures of sex without conceiving.
Yes.
So unless you outlaw it, unless you outlaw that in the platform, in effect, we'd still have an awful lot of vice, even if the American Solidarity Party got in. But you're saying all along, you can't say unless this thing is perfect or unless it's going to work 100%, no one should vote for the good things that are in the platform. That's obvious, right?
Yes.
And Rhonda knows I'm eager to talk. Yeah, I'm here. Rhonda knows I'm eager to talk. There's a deeper level, and that is any organization that speaks out of a Christian, even Catholic mindset, assumes the natural law behind all of our opinions and assertions. And there's a growing body in the secular world who I've heard people say there's no such thing as natural law. And of course, if there's no God, then it's hard to defend the idea of a natural law. So I think
no, it isn't. No, it isn't.
Yes, but most secular people think so, and a lot of Christians would stop at that point, thinking they were against an insurmountable opposition. But my point, I guess, is that somewhere in if the party is essentially Catholic Christian, then they somewhere need to defend the understanding that there is indeed a natural law and its both its sources and its consequences.
Yes, I think that's right. Now, I want to ask a favor here, just a technical favor. We have a fellow who's been trying to get in, and he says he can't. But he says, if you can dial me, I can join in. And then he gives his number. I wonder if one of you could do that?
Well, I can't do that because I'm sitting outside my daughter's house with the cell phone.
Can Bob, can you do that?
Can I do what?
All right. There's a fellow who's been trying to get in.
Yeah.
He says when he calls the number, it fails to go through. I wonder if you could call him. He says, if you can dial me, I can join in. My number is, and then he gives the number.
Yeah, let me, let's check with, I'll check with Sebastian, see what we can do there.
Okay.
Okay?
But why can't he get in?
I don't know. Somebody else had the same problem a couple weeks ago.
So he's calling in. He's not clicking the radio, listen now. He's calling in.
He's calling.
Yeah, it says you can call in.
Conversation. So. He's calling in to join the conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay.
To return to Al's point, we did do, didn't we, a whole discussion on natural law, and I guess as far as I'm familiar with the program, and it's been at least a day since I read it, it's all structured in the sense of natural law as right reason. There is an objective moral order. We can come to know objective moral truths. We are not a philosophical curriculum, but we are a political party that doesn't think that we have to avoid ethical foundations. We welcome discussion of ethical foundations. So I think there's a recognition of the importance of if you have a policy statement, you got to say what its ethical foundation is. And you got to say that its ethical foundation doesn't begin with, I strongly feel that. You got to say that its ethical foundation begins with, there is a reality. We have access to that reality. There are empirical facts, but guess what? There are moral facts, and we can come to know the central moral facts. So I think that spirit suffuses the platform.
Okay, let me just do my one-sentence refutation of the idea that without God there can't be natural law ethics. You mean to say no one who is an atheist could think that Hitler was wrong? Okay.
Yeah, people live the natural law even if they think there is no such thing.
No. Even if you don't believe in God, you could believe that there's such a...
Hello?
Most people don't...
You're breaking up, Rhonda.
There is a distinction that I think is useful. There's a distinction between knowing the natural law but not being able to articulate it, and even coming to know it more than one has in the past through the practice of justice, and, on the other hand, being able to give a philosophical, propositional account of natural law. And I think Aristotle's on to that much at least when he says crucial for the development of virtue is that you have to live in a community in which people practice virtue. It doesn't follow that if you live in such a community you'll be able to give a philosophical account of natural law, but you will have a in-practice knowledge of it. Just as somebody who's a craftsman, for example, might not be able to write a how-to manual, but the more that she or he practices the craft, the better he or she becomes in the practice of that craft. Well, I guess I can go ahead a little bit here. If you're with me still. Here's something that I think of interest. Even in arguing for education aimed at developing virtuous citizens, a point is being made because a great many theories of education and educational systems will talk about being a citizen, because a citizen turns out to be somebody who will participate in the social contract of the day, but they won't talk about virtue. And I think the very idea that virtue is seen as the proper business of education is a significant step ahead of many accounts of education and what it should aim for. Now, there's another point here in this last bullet point that I think is interesting. There's a special recognition given to vocational training. And Rhonda was saying something about how the education might all be in the use of technology, and it would be an unregulated technology and the like. But the very term vocational training, I think, is interesting and important from a Christian Catholic perspective. Vocation, that's a calling, and could there be vocational training? Well, that brings us to one's theology or philosophy of work. And unlike classical Greek philosophy, Christians think that work with your hands is of enormous importance. And you can have a vocation to be guess what, carpenter. And that's something that's well worth receiving an education in. So this whole idea of vocation, and that it can have to do with, sure, technical things, but also manual things, is important from a Christian perspective, because we take work.
Bob, can you give me that telephone number of that man?
Yes, 530-276-1008. 530-276-1008.
I got it. Okay, I'm working on it.
Okay. Now, oftentimes I've read various people, commentators, saying, well, whatever happened to vocational training? And, well, what happens to it, I think, is it gets lost in the shuffle to have something that's economically more productive or thought to be economically more productive. But work with one's hands is already an incredibly productive and important thing, and is recognized as such not by Aristotle, he'd say that's for the slaves, but certainly by Christianity.
Oh, now that's a very, very interesting point, but I ask myself this. Before industrial capitalism took over, people learned trades as apprentices. They didn't have to go to a school. They didn't call it education. They called it apprenticeship. And this was very natural and normal. You like carpentry. There's a carpenter in your village. You go to the carpenter in your village and you apprentice yourself to him. You know, this whole thing of you have to go to school to learn anything is all part of a whole system also related to Dewey's education, where the idea was that the school would be filled with these wonderful liberal-minded teachers who would help the poor farmers' kids to get out of their narrowness of mind into what we now have is the evolution of that. So they get away from thinking that sex has to do with babies because they see animals on the farm having sex and baby pigs coming out. They get to think that sex is just for fun. Isn't that wonderful?
Yes. Well, on your note of let's not get bogged down in credentialism so that only credentialed people can teach us anything, and you're talking about apprenticeship, I think I can skip back up to the top of this bullet list. So number one says the right of families to choose the best methods for educating their children, be they public, charter, private, parochial, or home-based education, I think that the spirit of the platform is, and this could be articulated, put in explicitly, and I don't think there'd be any difficulty with that, by a system of apprenticeship or home-based education, which would come together in the case of Jesus of Nazareth, who had a home-based apprenticeship.
CC, yes, wonderful. Very, very good answer, Jim. Actually, I'm raising these questions in a kind of sarcastic mode as the devil's advocate because I'm sure that Jim has good answers to these things I'm raising. I'm just raising them in the extreme in order to get clarity from Jim.
Now, listen, if our mystery guest could somehow be contacted, he would have better answers than I. And he said that he would like to get on a regular basis. This morning was going to be a little bit difficult for him, but I'm speaking of a young man named Skylar Kovich, who of the 6-person national committee, the new 6-person national committee, actually received the most votes, more than anyone else. And I think I mentioned also a couple shows back that third parties are tricky territory, and he just got a dissertation completed. He's a newly minted, piled higher and deeper, that is to say, PhD, and his work is on the history of and the prognosis for third parties in general. So, one of these weeks we'll get Skylar on. And I think that Bob is trying to get through to him now.
Oh, good. Thank you.
While we're waiting, I just went from number 10 bullet point to number 1 bullet point rather than reading all 10 first. And there are various reasons why, but here's a true anecdote told to me by someone that Rhonda and I both knew. A teacher whose, specialty was actually the philosophy of death, but also his night job, believe it or not, he'd go around giving talks on the philosophy of humor. And he told the story of a student who quite regularly fell asleep in class. And so with the connivance of the rest of the class, he said, midway into a lecture, when eyelids were already drooping, he said, midway into a lecture, I am now going to give you the 10 points that help to illustrate such and such a thesis. And he very deliberately began reading the 10 points as he slowly circumnavigated the room, coming up behind the student who almost fell asleep anyway. And when he got to point number 8, he said behind this fellow, and Smith, what do you think point number 9 will be? At which point there was an audible snore.
Very nice.
That's Howard Delaney.
Yes, I remember. I don't remember the anecdote, but I remember him, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is part of the illustration of the fact, even if things will never be perfect in education or anything else on the platform, that doesn't mean it couldn't be better. And of course, it's much better to have choices of homeschool supported by taxes, say, than to have homeschool eliminated as being the purview of fanatical Christians, right?
Yes, and sometimes you'll say, well, glad you're in Texas, and sometimes they'll say, glad I'm where I am in case I'm supposed to be called to mission work, but otherwise not so much. In California, it remains technically illegal to homeschool.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know that.
Now, it's ironic, the reason why the Board of Education never goes any farther is because it is already a laughing stock for the quality of public education, and they really can't educate more people than they have. They can't educate the people they do have, but they like to remind us that technically it's illegal. So here we have, pick a state in the union in terms of population. Here we have the party saying, look, specifically, home-based education is a right of a family to choose that. Let me check with Bob for a second. Bob, any luck?
Yeah. Hang on. Yeah, no, I can't get through to Sebastian either on email or phone. I don't know if he's at some meeting or something. I did call your friend in California, and I double-checked the numbers and everything. And
Bob, I'm here. Do you need me?
Oh, hi. Hello. Greetings from our panel to you, illustrious American Solidarity Party winner.
No, this is Sebastian.
No, this is Sebastian. Sebastian, listen, we have a man in California that I just checked with him again. He dials the number, the 515 number, and it won't go through. He's tried it a couple of times. It won't go through.
Oh, give him the 1-800. Yeah, give him the 1-800 number.
1-800.
I'm sorry, it's 844 801
801
6666.
Okay, I'll have to hang on to that number.
Okay, now
why? How could this be? How could it be that people can't get on?
Let me get.
He may not have long distance access on his phone. That may be that.
Oh.
844 801. And what? There were more numbers.
6666.
4 sixes.
Yep.
Okay.
And the same access code, 914121.
So
the other problem,
801 6666.
That's correct. Yes.
That's it. Okay.
Now
and access code 914121. So the same one that we use for the other numbers.
Now, are you listening to the station because it's breaking up?
Oh, I don't hear. It may be because I'm on. So when I go back on mute, it may not be breaking up anymore. But I'm not hearing any breakups.
Okay, because while I was checking it before I called.
Oh,
but
hold on a second.
I'll get him that number anyway. Okay.
Right. Well, remember the age-old wisdom of the great song: breaking up is hard to do.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, I'm going back on mute. Have a great rest of your show. I'll listen to the station from the app and see whether or not I hear any breakups.
Okay. Well, shall we return?
Yeah, Jim, I got a question for you, Jim. Al.
Okay.
Regarding the party, if their target is to gain credibility in the general population, that's one thing. If they are just seeking members of like-minded people, that's another thing. And I have a quote here, but I'm not going to give it unless your answer is correct. I'm going to say correct.
My answer be correct? Oh, you're going to give it only if I see.
Yeah, right. No, this is not a test. But which is it? If the intent of the group of the party is to merely collect like-minded people, which is certainly good enough, is that their aim, or are they trying to aim at the entire population?
That, in practice, if you were to read over the communications, say on Facebook, that in practice is a question that people struggle with all the time. On the one hand, they want to have a foundation so that they have something to bring to the general public. On the other hand, they don't want to be a discussion group. They want to go to the general public. And so that balance is something that's dealt with almost every day. And actually, in terms of technique, there are three different platforms, I guess is the right word. There's the official party platform, and people can add to that if they want to, raise questions if they want to. This is on Facebook. And then there's the unofficial platform, and that is used by a whole lot of people that are just kind of looking into this. And, truth be told, with a fair number of people who are mad at the party because the platform doesn't say enough about this, or it says too much about that. And that unofficial Solidarity Party platform is pretty freewheeling. And then there's the third platform, which is the one I mostly use, the registered Solidarity Party registered members private platform. There's a whole bunch of people on that as well, and I don't think more than 2 or 3 days go by where someone doesn't say, look, if we ever want to have general appeal, we've got to do such and such, and then somebody will say, look, if we ever want to have something to say to the public, we better figure out what the truth of the matter is about X, Y, or Z. So it's a seesaw, Al.
Yeah, okay. The reason I ask is... The way,
this is Bob.
Go ahead, Bob.
I did get the fellow the 1844 number, so hopefully he should be checking in soon.
All right, then, because he's late, he'll have to work extra, plus Rhonda has to leave.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason I brought that up is that the great unwashed out there are not just calmly going about their business. You will have, and probably already have found, active opponents who seem to deny the whole purpose of Solidarity as a party.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
I'm getting off now. God bless you all. Bye.
All right. Take care.
The quote I want to share with you is from Miguel Unamuno. He was the University of Salamanca. He was the rector up until 1936. And here's a quote from him. He says, Note the greater part of our atheists, and you will see that they are atheists from a kind of rage at not being able to believe that there is a God. They are the personal enemies of God. They have invested nothingness with substance and personality, and their no God is an anti-God. And I have right in my own family a militant atheist who would slay me with a sword if she could get close enough.
Don't let her get that close.
God. Huh?
Don't let her get that close.
No, thank goodness. And not literally, of course, but the party is not working against a benign populace. There are very strong and raging enemies out there to be aware of.
That is true, and I think very oftentimes, what should I say, facile, too easy efforts at ecumenism completely forget that. At the same time, there are people, I think, that we could have good discussions with, and there's a real effort to visit the Democrats for Life website and comment on things that they have and say, we really like this, and gee, given that you're saying this, you might really like us. Try the American Solidarity Party. But all of these things take a lot of time. I mean, scouring various websites to look for friends is a time-consuming thing, but I think a certain chunk of the day can be given to that. Now, I heard that ping, and I'm still thinking maybe that Skylar will join us. Is that right or wrong? Bob?
Apparently not.
Yeah, apparently not.
Another question for you.
Sure.
We're getting off education a little bit, but as a topic. But the party, is it still located in just Southern California there?
No.
Has it expanded, and to what extent?
It is not even primarily located in Southern California. It's truly a national party. I think a great many states have their own websites, as in, well, we have Solidarity Party of California. We have our own website, but many other states do too. And some of our listeners might appreciate this. There was a somewhat scholarly assessment of how third parties fared in the last election cycle. And when it came to the American Solidarity Party, first of all, it had to work to describe what the party was, because it's so much against the ordinary run of political groupings. And then it said, and this party seems to be strongest in the area around Steubenville, Ohio. So I thought that was an interesting twist.
Yes, indeed.
Well, maybe then I can go back to the bullet list here, and I understand that your broad political background is Republican, so I'm going to point to some things that you might have some fairly sharp questions about that. Fairly sharp questions about coming from that background. And the one that comes to my mind first of all is actually number 9 in the bullet list, the next to the last item. Expansion of student loan forgiveness and loan reduction programs. Now, when I read this, first thing that comes to mind is my most educated son currently owes over $200,000 to the government for loans. And this is in the course of going from undergraduate to a degree in Master of Public Administration to a law degree to now working on and coming to the dissertation phase of a degree in law and justice at the University of Irvine. And when we ask him about the loan, our stomachs are churning. What are you going to do about that? And he's actually, I don't know, maybe he's in knots on the inside, but he says, well, it's there, and I'll do what I can, and goes on to the next subject.
Yes.
By the way, this is Bob, and I got back to our man. He says the number goes through, but he can't dial he has no way to dial the code.
Okay. So we've got 2 people who've tried to get through and have run into that problem. So we'll have to have a head-to-head with Sebastian, and I guess it means that they have to get something on their machine that other people don't have, or that we have, but, I never had any problem, and I just...
No, well, see, but he can't do it. There's no place, he says, that he can dial the number, and he got through with the number, but he has no place on his phone where he can dial the code then.
Gosh.
So I don't know
why. All right, technical problem to be pursued.
Yeah, okay, good.
Okay, we're back on student loan forgiveness and loan reduction programs, and maybe we have a fiscal no-nonsense person to say a word or two on that. As in Al.
Say that again, please.
Okay.
You lost me.
Well, I recounted the story of my heavily indebted son who has student loans.
Yes.
The north of, I guess they say, the north of $200,000, seems to be taking it in stride, while his parents, to wit us, wonder how he can face the day.
I guess there's no easy answer to that one. Of course, the problem starts with the colleges and universities themselves that seem unchecked by any authority, and they can run up prices at will and build nice buildings. And somewhere in there, the education of the commoner, if you will, gets lost in the building of great buildings and edifices and named towers and that sort of thing. I think that's the core of the problem. But for the poor guy that's just got that kind of a debt, he either needs to marry a very rich wife, or you asked for pragmatism, there it is.
The trouble is, the wives and or husbands that they meet in these graduate programs are in the same predicament.
Yeah, we used to call it an MRS degree. The gals were there for an MRS degree.
Yeah.
And of course, among other goals was to find a guy who's going to be rich. Doesn't always work out that way. But I don't know, and I certainly would not recommend some great government authority to put the thumb on all the universities. That would be the worst possible solution. But for the guy that's already got the problem, I don't know. I don't suppose there's no such thing as an aftermarket grant that he could get. You're supposed to get grants to do something, to achieve something, rather than to say you have achieved something. So I'm not sure there is an answer to that, except the same thing that the people have huge medical bills do the same thing. They get a bill for, say, $2 million, and they send in $50 a month for the rest of their life. I don't know what else you can do.
A long-term relationship with the lenders.
Yes, right. Well, which is not nearly as pleasurable as with a spouse.
Right. Now, well, you made a comment about being wary of too much state direction with regard to this whole question of loan forgiveness, loan reduction problems, and it's starting with the universities. But by way of easy and natural transition, bullet point 8 says this. This would be something supported. Greater control of tuition rates at public institutions and stricter regulation of for-profit educational enterprises. Greater control of tuition rates at public institutions and stricter regulation of for-profit educational enterprises.
I hear that, but that's a two-edged sword. When you ask for control, you're going to get control. That's like the judges of the Old Testament. The people said they wanted a king, and the advice was, be careful what you ask for. You might get it.
And if you read the second book of Kings, you'll see a sorry record.
Yeah, and I'm sure they were very sorry when they got Saul and certain others over their heads.
Yeah.
Control is a two-edged sword. I think there's another problem underneath, and that is we pressure so many people now that they must have a college education when either their vocation does not require it or their aptitude does not allow it, and yet they're pressured into going to college, and that creates this huge influx of cash into these schools that schools then use for various things other than education. And I think if there wasn't the pressure for all these people to go to college, it really shouldn't. then that would certainly cut back on the cost of education in general.
I think that's exactly right. I've got a couple of personal things that connect with what you're saying, and maybe I can even say something that connects even more directly. We have a good friend who worked as a computer educator for a very definite for-profit educational enterprise. So she teaches computer skills, basic computer skills, and let's say some intermediate computer skills. She does it for a for-profit institution and is constantly pushed by the administration to track down each and every student who enrolled for her course or courses, track down each and every one of them, do everything possible to make sure that they continue in the course, do everything possible to make sure that they're there. And why? Because, well, then the for-profit institution can say, we really had this many students. Mm-hmm. And she would go to incredible lengths, calling people at home, trying to find out where they are now by talking to their boyfriends, begging them to come back to class. But something hit the fan when they got their certificates, and they were too personally undisciplined to get a job. Mm-hmm. So the government says, well, it looks like you've got enough people going to the school. Yeah, but how did they get them going to the school? Looks like you've got enough people going to the school, but they're not getting jobs. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Meanwhile, there are any number of openings for plumbers. There are a number of openings for craftsmen in various fields. Not that these people would necessarily do that either, but folk wisdom, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Now, also in the state of California, good grief, publicly, with a lot of attention, a group of law schools have said, look, we're going to drastically reduce the number of people we accept. And one of them that I've heard of for years said, look, we're part of a university, and we've decided it has been decided that we just won't have a law school for the next several years and see what happens.
That's probably a good thing.
Yeah, they're a glut of lawyers, and then the school that I taught at for so many years, almost always, there might have been one or two, maybe over 40 years, 3, almost always, every year, tuition goes up. Almost always. Mm-hmm. And in general, Jesuit universities, forever preaching a peculiar vision of social justice, their tuition rates have gone higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. And I think it's
where is the social justice there, huh?
Yeah, I think it's because they know that the students can get the student loans.
Sure.
So it is really a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Now, there are institutions that have drawn a line, and not in the sand, in reality. The Thomas Aquinas College, which I oftentimes have a good word to say about, and I wish I had the exact figure, but their tuition is at $26,000 a year, much lower than practically anybody's, incredibly strong educational program, and they refuse to have any student have what would be seen as a heavy student loan. They allow for student loans, but there's a real cutoff point, and when the cutoff point is reached, the university makes sure that the students accepts them, even though that they're going to take a loss on it. Now, shut me up when. Here's an incredible statistic. The universities of the country are rated on 100 different scales, and one of the scales is percentage and regularity of alumni donations to the university from which they graduate. Mm-hmm. Well, do your students love you? Do they really love you? Do they give anything to the university?
Yes.
And for the past 5 years, number 1 and number 2 rating. Highest percentage of students returning donations to their alma mater. It's gone back and forth. 1 year it's Princeton. The next year it's Thomas Aquinas College. Next year
yes.
Princeton. Next year Thomas Aquinas College.
There's a message there.
Yeah, and now, as with all messages, it's obscured in the bizarre. Other than Harvard, Princeton has the highest endowment of any university in the country. I cannot fathom why any student would return any money to Princeton. They're already extraordinarily rich. Whereas Thomas Aquinas College has an endowment of $5 million because it's a real college, not a sprawling university, and the graduating class every year is in the neighborhood of 280, 300 people. So there, along with all the social analysis, there are always a whole slew of ironies, sheer irony.
When I was very young, I was encouraged to go into sales by a certain individual, and he said that he lives on opium. And I said, what? And he said, no, not the drug, opium, other people's money.
Oh,
and he meant it, and that's the way he lived. As a salesman, he lived on other people's money. Opium.
Well, I think
and there's that attitude out there. There's that attitude out there, too.
Near the end, and I think I can maybe come close to the close with a true down-home Jesuit social justice initiative. And I'm sorry Rhonda's not on the show. For years and years and years and years, we taught with a Jesuit named Robert H. Taylor. And his nickname was Cog, because he always argued about the nature of cognition. Well, his guilty pleasure, but he didn't think it was guilty, was going to casinos. But he always said he hugely preferred a casino in which he was gambling against the house. And he only very reluctantly would participate in a casino in which he was gambling against his fellow players. The house, he thought, deserved to lose. On the other hand, here's an irony, or maybe not, rarely does the house lose overall, and fairly frequently your fellow gamblers do lose. So you're more apt to win money from your fellow players.
That's
so
correct.
Gambling is a tax on the poor.
Yeah. I once got a short briefing to the inner workings of a casino, and I guarantee you they don't lose. But that's another story for another time.
Yeah, well, they had him identified as a card counter. But
okay.
He said, I'm not quite there, but I'm close.
Yeah, I'm close. Yeah. Well, I was given a briefing by a certain New Jersey family, and they don't lose.
All right. Well, we have a firm purpose of technical resolution. We're going to get all these guests set up so that they can actually come. And our first guest, Kemi Ingram, who is, I must say, a computer wizard of the highest order, had absolutely no trouble getting on, none. So it must be that she has her phone set up in a way that it can be set up to get on. But I never knew my phone was set up that way, so I'm wondering if there aren't certain numbers that are waved in and other numbers that are just ignored. Well, Al, though you're not the prayer person that Rhonda is, could you finish with a prayer?
Okay. I will never beat Rhonda at that. Well, we thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to get like minds together and to cuss and discuss and always seek your truth. We ask you to be with us and be with Rhonda and her daughter as well, who is suffering terribly and has suffered for 5 years, that you bring peace to that family and to all our families. In Christ's name, amen.
Thank you, gentlemen, and we'll be back same time, same station next week. And in the meantime, may the Lord bless us, protect us from all evil, and bring us to everlasting life. Amen.
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 We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.